सबसे इजी कोर्स लगता है, ये सबसे इजी कोर्स है।
के गाइडेंस के बदौलत आज बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स इस इंस्टीट्यूट से बहुत अच्छे रिजल्ट्स के साथ पास हुए हैं।
Hey everyone, today we have Priyank Goyal with us. Priyank is a software engineer at Google and has very recently given his coding interview. Priyank has in fact given multiple interviews when it comes to the big companies like Facebook, Microsoft, and of course Google. So Priyank, would you like to say hi to all of us?
Hey, hi folks.
So Priyank, what's your experience like till now at Google? And if you can just shortly summarize what is the best thing till now that you have experienced at Google?
So till now my experience at Google is pretty awesome. If you'll ask, the best thing that I've experienced is food. The food in Google Bangalore office is pretty good, and there are a lot of varieties. And yeah, obviously work is also good, but right now I am currently in kind of ramp up phase, so I haven't got any new projects. But yeah, I assume like it would be pretty awesome.
Wow, so you're in the ramp up phase, which means you're completely fresh, which also means that your interview experiences are fresh on your mind.
Yeah, correct.
Most people ask, and this is probably the first question I want to ask you, is how did you apply?
Okay, so how did I apply it is that I didn't have to do anything because one of the Google recruiters who sits in Google Singapore approached me, and one day I received an email from Google recruiter that you have with that they have open positions at Google Bangalore office, and the positions were for a software engineer role, and if I'm willing to apply for the same. So all I have to do is to share my resume with them and just reply that yeah, I'm interested for that.
Most people, when they're applying for companies like this, find it really difficult to get shortlisted. So what would you suggest in terms of resume preparation, especially because a lot of people, when they send their resumes across, it doesn't get shortlisted, and that's the reason why they don't get interview calls.
So I think resume is something which is very important, and it's obviously one of the first steps that you have to take when you are applying for the company. And when then external person like HR is reviewing the resume, then on an average it takes very less time for the HR to go through each of the resume. So your resume should be very short and crisp and exactly to the point, and like it should not be very lengthy, and you should try to make a one-pager resume because on an average it should be one page, and if it is going longer than that, then you should rethink about that. And obviously it should have a good font and a good template, and it should be written in bullet points. And also if you want to make a good resume, then I have a video in which I have described resume making, so you can just go through that video and have a look there.
In fact, guys, the reason why I was able to meet Priyank and get to know about his work is because he posted a YouTube video which talks about his preparation in general for all the technical interviews he's done. Definitely check it out. It's very useful and it's very detailed. But Priyank, so you have talked about building your resume. Let's also talk about how do you get it, let's say, shortlisted, or how did you apply for these companies? Were there referral processes? Was it through LinkedIn that you were contacted, or did you contact recruiters by yourself? Like, there's a lot of confusion around this space usually.
So I applied in Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, and Google, all 5 of these. So the process.
Okay, that's all FANG then, yeah.
Yeah, so the process that I chose for Facebook and Microsoft was through a referral. So one of my seniors who was working in a Facebook London office, and one of the seniors who was working in Microsoft Bangalore office, I asked them for the referral, and they just referred me, and I got an email in which I have to fill out the positions for which I have to apply. So for Facebook, I applied for Facebook London, Facebook Dublin, and Facebook Singapore. Now I was aware that the Facebook offices are not in India, tech offices not in India, so it will take time. So I started my process for Facebook pretty early because I was aware that applying to a foreign location and other countries might take some time. And just after that, I asked for a referral for Microsoft, and I got a call after a week or so. And for Apple, I was connected with an Apple recruiter who on LinkedIn. So I just took her email from LinkedIn, and after that I just wrote an email that I'm interested in software developer position in Apple, and I just expressed my interest in that email. And Around 2 weeks later, I got a reply that probably she has forwarded that email to the concert department and they contacted me. And for Amazon, so there was a third party called InterviewBit who was the main contact for me for Amazon interviews. And for Google, obviously, I got contacted by the recruiter, so I don't have to do anything there.
Okay, that's very interesting because it seems like Google contacted you and a few other interviews happened because of referrals. When it comes to Apple, you contacted the person using LinkedIn, one of the recruiters over there, and they shortlisted your resumes. So this is interesting because it seems like you are able to attract a lot of the people who are looking to hire people. Could you give us a little bit of background about what you have done and which college are you from so people get a general idea of what it takes?
Okay, yeah, sure. So I have studied, so I have done my BTech from Computer Science and Engineering, and the college was IIT BHU Varanasi. And I have around 4 years of experience, and all this 4 years I was working as a software developer, and I have worked on the language that I've used for working is mostly Java and a few frameworks.
Have you worked in any large company like the ones that you just interviewed for?
No. So I haven't worked in like major MNCs till now. I was working in a startup, and prior to that, I was in probably a mid-sized company, not a very big MNC.
It seems like your educational qualifications, especially the college you come from, is a well-known one, but it's not necessary to get into a very well-known company when it comes to tech for you to get calls from tech.
Correct.
Nowadays, a lot of people are applying to companies through referrals. The two ways that I know about is you send your resume to a person who's working at that company and then you say that, hey, can you refer me? And the second way is that you actually know this person. That's like a hot referral, like where you know this person, you kind of trust them, and then you send your resume across and it works out. So I think you've tried both of them, right?
Yeah, actually, I tried both of them. So second one is very like it's a very general one that if you know the person, you can directly ask them for a referral. And the first one is something that not many people do, that just ask a referral randomly. But yeah, I mean there are some companies in which there is some kind of reputation that matters, but there are some companies which don't care if like as long as they are getting a good candidate. So you can try your luck on the first one, and if you get a call from there, then yeah, I mean it's awesome.
In terms of success rate, what do you think? Is it worth sending referrals to people who you don't know about, or would you not waste your time and just find out people who you already know somehow, some way, maybe through college, maybe through, maybe by working with them, and just focus on those guys when it comes to referrals?
Okay, so in general, referrals have obviously have a higher chance of getting shortlisted or getting a call. If you apply with someone who don't know you, then also you have a higher chance of getting a call as compared to applying directly, or as compared to just pinging the recruiter, because I know that recruitment is a tough job, and those guys gets a lot of maybe hundreds of messages daily, and it's very hard for them to keep track of all this. So yeah, probably referral might fast track your process.
What happens with a lot of the people I speak to when it comes to cold referrals, like you just send a referral across saying, hey, can you please refer me for your company for this position? And I don't know this person, right? The time and effort required to actually go through the resume is significant. So most people, what they do is they don't even see the resume. They just look at the person's maybe college, maybe the place where they're working at, and that's it. That's all they do. Based on that, they can either refer or basically go through the resume or not go through the resume. So I see the success rate in cold calling really, really low, while if you know the person, the success rate is really high. So in terms of that, like with you, did you try pinging a lot of random people with your resume, or were you really focused in terms of, I have friends here who are making sure that my resume is going through anyway, so I don't really need to bother myself that much?
So luckily, I was having my seniors and my friends in most of the major tech companies, so I don't have to go through all this. But yeah, I mean, I used to do this when I was in college, and on at my previous switch also, when I was doing that 3 years ago, I did some cold referrals, but the response was that like the success ratio was pretty less.
Okay.
So mostly I did it with
So that's really nice.
foreign companies. I mean, the companies which are in Europe side, and the companies which are in some in US. But that time I was not much aware regarding the visa, and also I did some cold applying.
It seems like the ground reality is that the college does matter to some extent. To get a chance, sometimes it does help, it seems, to come from either a big company or having worked a lot, or coming from a well-known college, at least when it comes to India. Is that a safe assumption to make?
All this kind of matters before getting shortlisted, but once you are shortlisted and once you are in an interview, then the only thing that matters is that how much you know and what is your understanding, and how are you able to code or not. These things really matter to, like, these things matter for you to reach, for making you reaching that state when you are giving the interviews. And once you are there, then these things don't matter. Only your performance in the interview will matter that point of time.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I've never seen any interview where a person says, "Which college are you from again?" Or, "Oh, let's ask a simpler question to the IIT guy." Yeah.
Like, if you have very good projects, or if you have done some research work or something, then probably there's a higher chance. So if you are not from a tier 1 college, and you're from a tier 2 or tier 3 college or something, then what you can do is then you can just choose some good projects, and you can just have some good ranks in competitive programming, so that your resume will stand out of the other resumes.
True. My personal experience with this is, if you have a project which is well made, preferably backed by a professor, because usually the professor is able to direct you in terms of what the project should have, what are the things that you should be growing yourself on. And apart from this, like, don't go for just one project, do multiple projects if possible. The reason why a lot of people do computer programming and it really helps them is because it is related to problem solving.
Correct. And also, one important thing that competitive programming do is that it kind of trains your brain to think that what algorithm and what data structure you can apply to a certain problem. Because if you do not practice and you give the interviews directly, then it might be tough for you to think like the exact solution, or maybe think the exact answer if you're out of practice. So it's very important to be in practice when you're giving the interviews.
Correct. All right, Priyank, that means that we are now heading to the coding interview. So we talked about how you can probably, build your resume, how you can get it shortlisted, how you can send it to people to actually go into the process. But once you have the coding interview scheduled for you and you're sitting in the coding interview, you need to be prepared for it. So what's the kind of preparation you went through for your coding interviews, especially?
Okay, so for the coding interviews that I have in this switch, actually, I did not do a lot of preparation, because I was pretty much aware that what are the areas where I need to focus. I mean, this is not the first time when I was preparing for the coding interviews, and I have done it previously in once in college and once in my last switch. So it was probably the third time. So I was aware that what are the areas where I need to focus on, and what are the areas which I can delay, and probably if anyone will ask me questions on that area, then I'll not get blanked out in the interview. That was something that was in my mind. So firstly I just covered the basics of all the areas. Like, I first covered the basics of graphs, the basics of trees, and heaps and all. And once the all the basics things are done, then I just practice a lot of questions, so that I can just be fluent on writing the code, and just think it through, and like how it is going, and if I'm able to think that what the solution is, and you know see exactly that if the complexity is correct or not, like things like that.
So you went through some of the things that you find are both common to interviews and also something that we don't, remember day to day, like graphs that you mentioned. Are you talking about breadth first search and depth first search, or are there more complicated algorithms that need preparation?
Yeah, so if we'll talk about the basic algorithms of graphs, then yeah, they are DFS and BFS. So I mean, there is no point of going to going to more hard things like maybe Dijkstra or maybe Floyd Warshall or something, if you are not comfortable around DFS and BFS. So my approach was that first to cover the basics of all the algorithm, like all the key key topics, and post that if I get time, then I get to the details and to the more complex data structures. For example, in trees you have red black trees, and you have kind of segment trees. So I first covered all the basics of the trees, and post that when I was having some time, then I went to just do a few questions regarding these all these topics.
So Priyank, you mentioned that you were asked heavy light decomposition in your coding rounds. Is that true? Along with persistent segment trees?
No, I was not asked. Looks like there is a myth that the Google interviews are gonna be of a very hard level or maybe on a different level and the difficulty is high. But what I feel is that they generally test your thinking ability, and if you are able to think the solution, and if you are able to convert the thoughts into code or not. And also one of the most important thing is whether you are correctly explaining what you are thinking or not. If you'll combine all those things, yeah, then interviewing is not tough.
It seems like they test you on things which seem to make practical sense. So if you don't have a lot of prerequisites already involved, so they ask you something which is probably something you can solve in the 1 hour. They're expecting good code and they're expecting you to communicate your ideas, which actually happens at the workplace also when you need to discuss your ideas.
Correct. So it's generally it's a 45 minutes round, and in 45 minutes you probably cannot expect someone to write code for maybe red black tree. So yeah, they keep it simple and they just ask things that are kind of necessary.
One of the things that people don't tend to focus so much on is communication. It's also very difficult to do because when you're doing it alone, like if you sit down with Algo Expert or Lead Code and you're just typing out all the problems that you can, there's really nobody to communicate with. So you can practice coding, you can practice a lot of things, but communication is something that is difficult to practice. Do you have any tips that people can take for this particular thing, like communicating during the coding interview?
Yeah, so communication is another thing which is very important, and one thing that I want to make clear is that communication is something which if it generally comes to you if you will give a lot of interviews. Either you will give a lot of interviews or either you give some mock interviews, because if you are someone who is very good at competitive programming, then it might be possible that you might not be as good in explaining a solution to others, because what happens in competitive programming is that you have a laptop and you just type some solution and you submit it to the website, and there they'll run the code and will check. But here you will have a person in front of you and who will just look at you when you're solving things and probably ask some questions to you in between, and in the end you have to explain a solution to that person, and you have to make sure that whatever you are saying is the other person is trying to catch that, because it might be possible that you will begin with some base knowledge that okay, let's have this, but the other person is not aware. So communication is something which is like building that is very important, and it's not very easy to build that while having competitive programming. So yeah, you do have to do some practice apart from that.
Yeah, the people talk about writing production level code in interviews. I mean, that just sounds so silly actually, because how do you write production level code in interviews? But I think the gist must be that.
So yeah, exactly, the expectation is that you'll write some code which is production level, but it's very obvious that whatever code you will write in the first go might not be the optimal one, and it might contain some bugs. So all you have to do is that just ask the interviewer that if you want to improve the solution or not, and once you are finalized with the solution, then just test your code with your own test cases, so that you are the one you are the one who will be pointing out the issues there, and do not give the interviewer a chance to point out a bug in your code. That actually counts as a big negative.
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting, because even in real life, when you write some code, they're expecting you to take ownership of the code. So test cases, right. And they don't want the reviewer to be talking about. So this happens a lot, by the way, when you're software engineering. People come up with code. If it has a bug, your entire focus goes on the correctness of the code instead of the quality of the code. By the time they're done finding out all the bugs, they have no interest in thinking about the architecture or the code quality or anything like that. I think it's quite important because if you take ownership of the code, then you definitely think about its correctness. You'll write test cases, you'll make sure that it's working as expected, and that effort required for the reviewer to go through the bugs is taken up by you, which is a good thing. I mean, if you're a teammate, that's the kind of teammate that we are all looking for. One thing that people tend to miss out on is the behavioral interview. Like, people don't prepare for this so much. They think about it and they just go there, unprepared. Before we head further, I'll just clarify what the behavioral interview is for the viewers. You're asked questions on the things that you have done till this point, and also on your attitude, general attitude as a software engineer. So for example, did you ever mentor anybody? Did you mentor interns? Did you mentor the junior engineers who joined you? Did you ever have a conflict that you resolved with your manager? And these are the kind of questions that you're usually asked. Priyank, you can probably shed more light here. What do you think is the importance of this behavioral interview? What do you think are the common mistakes people make, and any tips that you would like to give them?
Okay, sure. So, so behavioral interviews are a kind of a cultural check whether you are eligible, whether you are culturally fit to work in the company or not. And culture is something that MNCs or like probably any company now that is something which is of great importance, and no company can just allow someone to just join the company who is not actually a cultural fit there. So behavioral interviews are a cultural check, and if you have a few years of experience, then it's a kind of a mandatory that the company will take a behavioral interview of yours. Also it depends on the company whether it wants to take or not, and nowadays I'm seeing that a lot of companies are taking these behavioral interviews for freshers also, because they don't want anyone to enter without having this cultural check. And yeah, I mean, these interviews are not something which we face, the questions are not something that we face in our day-to-day life, and I think some dedicated preparation to these behavioral interviews is very necessary, because they are majorly focused on you and what kind of past experiences you have, and how you think on a certain situations. So in the coding round and in the other rounds, you might not be aware that what questions is the person gonna ask, but in the behavioral interviews you know in advance that what are the questions gonna be about. So it will be about you only. So all you have to do is to make good stories to tell, because obviously when a person will ask you a question, then you have to give the answer, and if you will give the answer in a form of a well prepared story, then the person will be able to understand that what you are trying to convey, and that will leave a much more impact on that person, and probably that will help them to judge you better, that are you a better culture fit for the company or not. If you'll divide the behavioral questions in two major categories, then it would be one is the questions which are based on your past experience, and if you're a fresher, it might be general kind of questions in which you have to answer. Maybe it's a kind of some attitude check that in this situation what you're gonna do, and the second category is hypothetical questions, in which the interviewer will put you in a certain situation, and all you have to do is to tell the interviewer that what are you gonna do in this situation on, and probably they'll ask you some follow-ups on that. So these are the two major categories on which you will be judged on the behavioral interviews.
What was your experience like in the behavioral interview? Was it nice, or were you on fire?
So like if my experience was good only. I discovered something while giving the interview. So I gave a few interviews when I was not aware of this technique, and after that I just googled around it a bit, and I got to know about something which a technique which is called as star technique that I have mentioned in my video also. So this technique is something which this is called star technique, and this has STAR. So S is the situation, T is the task, A is the action, and R is the result. So whenever you are answering a behavioral question, just try to make your story around something that will have S, T, A, and R. So a story has a beginning and some context and then an end, right? So if you'll make your story with this, keeping this STAR in mind, then probably you'll make a good enough story, and the interviewer will be convinced out of that. So if you want some examples, you can just go and just google around a bit, and you will find a lot of questions for behavioral interviews, and just that's because the answer for these questions will be different for every person because their past experiences are different. So just get the questions from the internet and just try to make your own stories using this method, and I'm sure that you will be able to make some good stories and give some convincing answers in the interviews, and that really helps.
Right. All right, Priyank, I think we have a ton of information that you have given us. It's all very useful, I'm sure. And thank you so much for coming. One of the things that I'd again like to remind everyone is that Priyank has a YouTube channel on which he's thinking about posting quite regularly. He's already posted one of superb video when it comes to practicing for interviews. So do go ahead and check that out. And Priyank, is there something else that you're thinking about posting next?
Yeah, so actually, the video that I've posted, I've asked for the comments that what should be my next video. So I've got a lot of comments that just share the interview experience with Amazon, with Microsoft, Apple, and Facebook. So I'm planning to do that, but before that, I want to touch upon a very important thing, that how I prepared for these coding interviews, and there I'm gonna share some resources and some tips and tricks that people can use for them to just brush up their coding things and just start with that. So yeah, this is the next video that I'm planning, and yeah, sometime soon I'll be doing it, probably in Diwali or something.
Okay. And over here, I'd like to say that there's Algo Expert, which you can use with the promo code of Gaurav. So that gives you 30% off. And I know you didn't mention it, but the links are in the description below if you're looking for. I mean, if you're not sure which site to use, there's Algo Expert. That's not a real problem. Of course, there's Lead Code also, which is, I think, very, very famous when it comes to interview preparation.
Yeah, Lead Code, Leaks, Coacher, Code Sources, Pods, and yeah, the new one, Algo Expert. I mean,
Yeah, there's Geeks for Geeks, Interview Bit, Code Chef is more compared programming, I'd say. Code Forces also. But yes, these sites are all free. There's Lead Code and Algo Expert, which are paid courses. And yeah, I mean, there's differences in all of them. I think I made a video on interview preparation, like just preparing for your interviews and which sources to pick up. Maybe guys can go and check that out. But thanks, Priyank, and it's wonderful that you are, going to be making more videos on this. So guys, do go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we'll have another collaboration soon.
Cool, yeah, thanks a lot, Gaurav, for making this happen.
All right, we'll see you next time then. Bye-bye.
Cool then, yeah, bye bye.